Hello people, you're welcome to ProUp Masterclass. My name is Tola T.A. Alabi, and in today's class, I want to talk about something I'll title When Things Don't Work Out the Way You Plan. When things don't work out the way you plan. And in today's class, I'm going to be telling you about how to handle what we see as disappointment or failure. Because a lot of times we use that word failure, but I don't believe anything is a failure till we get to the end. Till we get to the end of a thing. So a lot of times we might sum up a task we've done or in life that hasn't worked out as a failure. But you can't call it a failure till you get to the end of your life. So until you get to the end of your life, nothing can be considered a failure and nothing can be considered truly successful. The worth and value and the result of everything is always known in the end. Not in the beginning, not in the middle, but at the end. And in today's class, I'm going to be telling two stories. One is a very old story, and one is a pretty recent story. But they're true stories. And I want you to try to listen to the story and try to take some value out of them. So the first story is a story I read in a book I'm currently reading right now. The book is called The Lives of the Stoics. The Lives of the Stoics. And it chronicles the life of philosophers from a man called Zeno to the emperor called Marcus Aurelius. And it's a pretty interesting book. If you are interested in philosophy as a subject matter, it's a great book. The Life of the Stoics by Ryan Holiday. And it starts out talking about a philosopher called Zeno. And that's the story I'm going to talk about. And Zeno was born in very early on, in maybe about 200, 300 BC. And he was born to a very wealthy family. He was a very wealthy man, and the family business was to sell something called purple dye. And at that time, around 300 BC, purple dye was very rare because it was hard to create that color purple. And purple was, and because it was so rare, it was something only royals wore. And so they had to create it extracting like the blood of snails. So it was a very painstaking process. And so the dye was very expensive. But his family, they were big merchants of this purple dye. And he had taken over the family business at that time. And he was a young man in his 20s. And at a point, he had a huge supply of this purple dye. And he was going to sell it around his region. And then the only means of transportation, for going from place to place when we came to going from country to country was by sea. There was no air transportation. So he had this cargo of purple dye on the high sea. And a very unfortunate thing happened. There was a shipwreck. Now, what caused the shipwreck, we don't know, whether it was a storm or it was pirates or stuff like that, but there was a shipwreck and all the merchant, all the products that he was going to merchant was destroyed. He lost every single thing. Every single thing. And this was before people had insurance for their products. He lost every single thing. So he went from being super rich to being super broke. And at that time, he was in a place called Athens. Now, nobody knows why he was in Athens, whether it was in Athens to wait for the goods to arrive so he could sell the goods at Athens, because Athens was a very, very booming commercial city at that point in time. So it was like New York or Lagos, where if you really wanted to what they call blow, you go to Athens. So he was in Athens, probably waiting for his products to land so that he could sell them in Athens. So he must have promised some people, people that are arriving, and maybe taking money from people in advance who were ready to buy this purple dye. But then this disaster happened, and as I said, he went from really rich to very broke and almost owing people. So he was destitute on the streets of Athens, and it was a terrible period in his life. So he went walking on the streets of Athens, just walking aimlessly. And because he was from a very rich family, he wasn't used to doing menial jobs, so he didn't know what to do with himself. So one day, walking the streets of Athens, he walked by a bookstore. And in that era, when people wanted to sell books, the owner of the bookstore, the bookseller, would come out each day to read various sections of each book. So when you hear him reading the book, you would know whether you were interested in the book or not. So there was no way of advertising books then. You couldn't go and check for a review of the book online. So the bookseller had to do this task of reading some books every day, and people would listen and say, "Oh, I'm interested in that book." So that very day, the bookseller came out and was reading a book written almost 200 years or 100 years before Zeno, and it was written by an earlier philosopher called Socrates. And Zeno heard him reading that book and was so enthralled by that book that he stopped to listen to the reading of the book. And after he listened to the book, he went up to the bookseller and said, "Where can I get a teacher like Socrates? Where can I find my Socrates?" And at that time, when Zeno approached the bookseller to ask where he can find a philosopher like Socrates to teach him philosophy and to teach him clarity about life, there happened to be a man called Crate, who was a very popular philosopher at that time, walking by. And the bookseller said, "If you want to learn anything about philosophy and clarity in life, go to that man." And Zeno went to him, and Crate became Socrates' teacher. And Socrates became Zeno's teacher. I beg your pardon. And Zeno became one of the greatest philosophers ever. As a matter of fact, when Zeno was leaving Athens after a number of years of serving as a philosopher and an advisor and a counselor, he left with a crown. They gave him a golden crown, and there was a statue of him erected. He was given the keys to the city, and it was interesting that he came to Athens in a bid to be a successful businessman. And that all that came crashing down with one misfortune. But in the end, that misfortune was meant to happen so that he could be destitute, and then he could walk by that bookstore and at that very time listen to a book that was written hundreds of years ago by a philosopher, and he will be introduced to philosophy. And at that very time, the prominent philosopher of that time, Crate, will be walking by and take him on as a student. You see, things happened in a way that Zeno did not plan. Zeno did not plan for his life to turn out that way. When things happen in a way that you did not plan for, a lot of times things happen in a way that they were meant to be. So you see, at that very time when the shipwreck happened, Zeno had failed. But it wasn't a failure because it led to greater success. And that's a lot of times when we look at our lives, we think, "Oh, I started this job, I got fired. I went into this relationship, I got my heart broken. I started this business and it failed. I didn't get any clients. What was the use of this? It was just a waste of time. It was just a waste of time. Oh, I wish it didn't happen. And sometimes we wish for things, or we wish away things too early, because we can never dismiss anything. As I said at the beginning of this, you can't dismiss anything till the end. Everything is potentially useful till you get to the end. The second story I'm going to tell you is more recent, and is a story about my friend in the university. Now, some weeks ago, I was in my study, and my son was there with me, and he was rummaging through a drawer in my study, and he pulled out a CD and said, "Daddy, what's this?" Now that I think about it, I'm thinking, was he asking what CD is this, or what is this contraption called a CD? Because I realized that CDs aren't so popular anymore. But he pulled it out and said, "What is this?" And I looked at it, and I was really, really amazed and excited, and I grabbed it from his hand. I'm like, "Where did you find this?" He said, "I found this in this drawer," and it was all dusty. And this was a CD that was made by my friend in the university 20 years ago. And I was surprised that this CD was even in my house, because I had the CD before I got married, before I had kids, while I was just a fresh graduate. And you see, the story to the CD was, I had this friend in university who was an incredible creative. He was very talented poet, very talented rapper, very talented songwriter. He was very talented. He was like a true creative. But he was really interested in hip hop music, and was really, really good at writing rap music and writing incredible lyrics. And so one day we were on holiday from school, and he had used this holiday to record a demo CD. And so we got back to school, and he gave me this demo CD and said, "This is what I did during the holiday." And I listened to it, and it was incredible. It was incredible. It was good. It was really good. It was better than anything out there at the time. And I was like, "This is really good." And his intention was to push it as much as possible. And the music industry then was just beginning to blow up in Nigeria. And hands down, he had more talent than a lot of people out there. So I was really excited that this was going to happen for him, because listening to this demo CD, I was like, "There's no way this is not going to happen for you with this body of work." It had like 3 songs. So I was like, this is just incredible. And so, he gave me the CD as a friend, just to listen to it and like maybe spread the word too. And yes, nothing happened. That was the last I heard, of him concerning that CD. Nothing ever panned out. He like got a regular job. He didn't become a music superstar. He didn't become a rock star. He didn't become a rap star. He didn't become, he just seemed to be a normal guy. And it seemed like that CD had failed. It seemed like nothing came of it. So when I got that CD from my son, it took me back 20 years. And because CDs are not so popular now, I didn't have a CD player in my house to play it. So, but I remembered I had a CD player in my car. So I went into my car and I popped in the CD, thinking the car was going to tell me error, give me an error message, or can't play this CD, because it was such in bad shape. But it was in this case, which was a good thing. And to my utter surprise, it played clearly. And I turned it up in my car, and I called my friend, and I like, "Listen to what I'm listening to right now." And he was silent for a very long time, and he listened to it. And then he said something. He said, "Thank you, because I've been in the dumps emotionally. I've been very sad and almost depressed, just really sad about things. And just listening to this right now lifts me up, because I don't even have this thing. I'm not listening to this thing in years. I don't have a copy of this thing." And he told me, "Can you kind of rip this CD and send me this thing?" So I went to my computer and just ripped it, and I sent it to him by email. And I was so grateful, and it was like, I really needed this right now, because I was in a really dark place. And I spent the whole day thinking about that event, what happened. And I said, when my friend was recording this body of work, which was incredible, his hope was that it will get him a record deal, and he will be noticed in the industry and get really big in the industry, because he deserved to, by how good that was. I mean, when I say it was so good, when I listen to it now, it's even better than what is out there right now, 20 years later. It was that good. But you see, his plan was this was going to work out for that. But then God had bigger plans. And you see, God knew he would be in the dumps 20 years ahead. So he had him record his demo earlier. 20 years. God planned for his emotions 20 years earlier and said, okay, you record this thing, and then you will give it to a friend of yours who will keep it, whose son will stumble on it and send it to you just at the time when you need it emotionally. That was the essence of the CD. And when I spoke to him days later, I was in a much better place. And he said, you know what? I need this CD because there were some things that God was asking me to do that I just needed something to make me believe I can do it. And listen to that CD, just that emotion, just that if I did this, I can do this thing that God is asking me to do now. You see, it built his confidence for now. That thing was not meant to get him a record deal. It was meant to prepare him for something greater, and it was meant to spoil him when he didn't have any self-belief, to remind him of who he really was as a creative. So you see, when things don't happen the way you plan, a lot of times things happen the way they are meant to, which is way greater than the way you plan. So stop looking at that disappointment as a write-off, as something you want to blot out of your story, because it could be very useful. It could be very useful in the story of your life. As a matter of fact, that disappointment, that misfortune could be the center point or that landmark that you're going to point to as being the changing point of your life for better. So whenever you're going through disappointment, think of these two stories I've told you. True stories, the story of Zeno and the story of my friend. It's happening every day. It's happening in your life right now. Your life is more intentional than you think it is. And I hope someone can listen to this and find some encouragement, find some hope, and find some direction. And I hope you all have a great day.